Hi and welcome to another video on cognitive biases, and today we're exploring intentionality bias, so keep tuned to find out more. Yes, good morning and welcome to another Exploring Cognitive Biases episode. I'm Duncan Price from Mind Affinity and I love the mind, and so let's explore the mind a little bit more together today, shall we? So one of the things, what I'm talking about today, the bias I'm focusing on, is intentionality bias. It is a really common implicit bias that we pretty much all have and experience regularly, often without even realizing we're doing it. And it's a very, very simple one to understand. Basically, we assume, often wrongly, that people's actions are intentional. That's it. So whenever someone does something, by default, we are inclined to believe that every action is intentional, unless we stop and think about it differently, or are given some reason to think about it differently, some encouragement. So a great example of this, a study was carried out where people were asked to decide if something was intentional or unintentional based on very, very little information. In fact, just a simple sentence. So it would be something like, he set fire to the house. And I wonder, do you think he set fire to the house is intentional? Did he do it on purpose? Well, the thing is, we don't know from that bit of information, but by default, most of us would assume that it was intentional. Where it gets even more interesting is that we do the same thing under pressure, even for things that we wouldn't necessarily think logically to be intentional. So he set fire to the house, sounds very intentional. I see I've got a few more people watching. So intentionality bias, assuming that people intended to do the things that they do. So if you heard someone talking and saying, he burnt down the house, would you initially think that to be that he did it intentionally or he did it by accident? Let me know in the comments. And another one would be, she broke the vase. Again, would you consider that to be intentional or accidental? Well, interestingly enough, one of the studies that was done put people under pressure in one group and not in another. So people who had more time to think about it were less likely to assume that it was intentional. But people who were told to give an answer straight away and they were under pressure and there was time limit and they had to give a quick answer, even sentences like she broke the vase, which we would normally think about, certainly logically, as being a sentence where it's more likely that it was an accident. Thank you, Sarah. Absolutely. So it is something that is more likely to be an accident. She broke the vase, we would think. However, if people are put under pressure, at least in study conditions, and told that they have to come up with an answer very, very quickly, even sentences like she broke the vase then tend to actually be interpreted as an intentional action, which is interesting. Now, forgetting about the study and hypothetical ideas, let's put that to one side and look at real life examples. Because I know I've experienced it myself plenty of times, and I'm sure you all have too, where there's been a situation, a misunderstanding between friends where he said this or did this and she said or did that. And we feel aggrieved, we feel like there's some problem, maybe they're upset with me, maybe I've done something wrong, whatever it might be. And eventually you have a conversation with that person, you clear the air and you realize that actually you'd kind of made a big deal out of nothing. You've kind of taken situations, excuse me, normal situations, understandable things, they've done this, you assume that it means something, that there's meaning behind that, that they're doing it to get back at you, or, group of friends end up meeting up and you're not included, so you assume that they've done that intentionally. They decided to meet up without you and leave you out. They obviously don't like you. It's something that you've done wrong, or you've upset someone. And actually, they just happened to be in the same place together. Two of them had met up for a walk, and the third one they bumped into, and they just all happened to go to the pub. They didn't intentionally not invite you. They just ended up at the pub together. But we very easily look at it and go, oh, that's intentional. And that hurts. This is one of the most common inherent biases that we just don't notice. And all I can say, the best thing I can do to encourage you to benefit from understanding about this bias is, if you find yourself in a situation where someone has wronged you, or you're feeling down about yourself because of someone else's actions, stop and remind yourself that actually the chances are it probably wasn't intentional. And if it was, they're probably not someone worth getting worried about anyway. But generally speaking, we tend to assume intent. We assume people did things on purpose, and we make it all about us, right? They did that on purpose, and they did that to me. Whereas in reality, it happened. They did it. One of my favorite ways of looking at things is, how people say everything happens for a reason. And my logic is everything happens. It's up to us to create the reason, right? Those people didn't do that for a reason. They did that. And we have a tendency to assign logic and reason, and we assume that it was done intentionally. But so often that's not the case. So when we understand this and when we embrace this, it helps us to have a bit more patience with those around us. It helps us to be a bit more understanding. But more importantly, it helps us to feel better about ourselves and stop second guessing everything so much, and allow ourselves the time to think about whether or not those actions were really likely to be intentional, rather than going with that instant gut feeling, which of course is going to be stronger if it's something that emotionally resonates with you. For example, friends going out and choosing not to invite you. So that's it, really. A nice simple one today: intentionality bias, the tendency that we all have to assume that other people's actions are intentional when they might just be coincidental, accidental, or they may not even be aware that they've done it. So look out for that. And if you've enjoyed this video, like, follow, subscribe, all of that jazz, and do share it with someone else if you think it could help them. And remember, you're awesome. So go out there and stay awesome. Thanks very much for tuning in, and I'll see you again next week with another video exploring a new cognitive bias. Until then, have a great week. Cheers. Oops. That should have been an outro video. That didn't work. Let's try again. Bye.